welcome to my Twitch stream. I am Andrew Turley, and I am going to be working on my Twitch IRC bot that I started working on in, I guess, my last stream. So anyway, this is a Twitch bot written in, or a Twitch chat bot written in Pony, and it's been a little while since I looked at it, so should probably just jump in and try to remember what I did. Give me a minute to get some things set up here. First, I will go to Twitch and see what's going on. Oh, okay. Looks like my cat's moving around. So for anybody who complained that there wasn't enough exciting cat action in the last stream, you can watch him, I guess, licking his butt. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, so when last we met, we had written a Twitch chatbot that uses IRC to connect to Twitch and then joins our channel and says something. So let's fire it up and see it in action. Oh, okay. So I've stored everything in this credentials file and I need to source it. Yeah, so that just sets some environment variables that my program reads. And there it is. If you're in the chat, you can see that famous Mr. Ed has joined, and it has said Wilbur, which is what the bot is designed to do. That, if I recall correctly, is basically all we made it do last time. But just as a recap, we've got our main actor. We read the nickname and password from the environment variables. So that's this stuff here. We get Twitch username and Twitch password. And then if we don't get a password or a nickname, we print an error message and we exit. And if we do get the password and the nickname, then we create a TCP connection actor. And just as a reminder, or in case you're joining for the first time, the way that you specify what to do with information inside your TCP connection actor, instead of subclassing the actor and adding methods that tell it what to do, you pass it an object that has methods that the actor then calls to carry out whatever actions you want it to carry out. So in our case, we created this Twitch chat client notify. So that's this thing here. That is a TCP connection notify object, and it implements some methods: connected, received, connect failed, that the actor calls. And so that's a pattern that you'll see pretty regularly in Pony, where you'll have an actor, and instead of subclassing something to create an actor that has certain behaviors, you'll pass in a object that has methods that do whatever it is you want done by the actor. So in our case, what we want to do is we need to, when we connect, we write out the password and the nickname, basically in IRC format, and that will create a connection, and then we wait for data to come in. So that's here in the received method. And we create this buffer where we store the data that comes in. And so in IRC, the message format is basically, a message is a bunch of text up until a carriage return and new line character. And so we keep adding the data that we've received to this buffer until we get to a point where we have the carriage return new line character. And if we get that, then we call this process message function. And if we don't get that, then this reader.line function fails or raises an error, and that causes this loop to exit, and we drop out of the method. Process message basically just looks for various things. So after we connect, after we send our username and password, we wait to see this "you are in a maze of twisty passages all alike" message from the server. At that point we know we're connected, and so we can join the channel. So that's what we do here. And then we look at the message that we get, and if the message contains, or if the first part of the message, or second part, I guess technically, is 366, then we know that we've gotten the message from the server that lets us know that we've finished joining a channel. And at that point, we send a message to that channel. In this case, Wilbur. So that is kind of the heart of this simple IRC bot. And it lets us have a bot that sits in the channel and does various things. So I asked on Twitter what people wanted to see, and they said they wanted to see more work on the IRC bot. Nobody really told me what they wanted to see me do with the IRC bot. And so I'm just going to kind of fake it for now. Let's see here. So unless somebody has something they really want me to do, in which case they should call it out right now or type something in the channel. All three of you who are here right now. Okay. So let's maybe just kind of look at some ways to make this a little more of a flexible system. So right now we've got a number of things that are hard-coded into it. So let's take a look at let's give it a list of channels that we want to join and see how to do that, so we can see a little bit more about how to work with the command line. So let's see here. Let channels equal. So the way that we get things from the command line is with this inv args list. So this is, sorry, array, not list. So inv args is an array, and it's basically like the argv array. If you're used to using language like C, most languages have something like this. So for now, let's do the simplest thing. Rather than trying to get involved with the class that actually has like a nice command line parser. Let's just pull out our arguments from the command line, kind of in a simple low-level way here. So what we want to do is get the third argument, which is 2 indexed. Second argument. I know, Sean, you love 0 indexing. Let's get this, and let's just write a note. So we expect the second argument to be a comma-separated list of channels that we want to join. And so we'll do that. And so we'll split the thing that comes out of here up into substrings. And this should give us an array of channels. And if this fails, so there's a question mark here at the end of args, that means that if we look up an index and that index doesn't exist, then an error gets raised. And so that gets caught by the try block, and we fall through to the else part. And so we'll just print a message here. It just says first argument should be a comma separated list of channels to join. And then we'll return. So it'll, if there's an error, it will error out. And that'll give us a list of channels. So let's try building this and just see if everything works. Hopefully Pony C works. I just upgraded my OS recently and I haven't really tried to build anything since then. So cross our fingers. So that looks good. All right, so let's actually do something with this channel list or channel array. So we're going to add that as another argument to our Twitch chat connection notify object or class create constructor. So means we need to add that up here. It's an array of strings, and we want it to be val, which means that it's immutable. So to that, we will add a channels member variable here. So somebody asked about this somewhere else. The underscore is not just a convention in Pony. If you have if you have a member variable or a method that starts with an underscore, that means that that thing is private, and so it can't be accessed outside of the class. So it's not like Python or other languages where you use an underscore and that's just a convention that other people know means don't try to access this. This is actually something that gets enforced by Pony. Okay, so we've got our channels list that gets in here now. How am I doing here? Yeah. Okay, and then when we connect, we want to join all of our channels. So create a for loop here, and join each of the channels in the list. Okay, and so that'll join each of the channels. That should put our bot in here. So let's just try it with one channel. Actually, first let's build it, make sure that works. And what did I screw up? Oh, okay. So the error is couldn't find has next in array. So what I did is I tried to loop over an array, and what I actually need to do is call values on the array, and that returns an iterator, and then I can do a for loop using that iterator. So, and then the way the Pony compiler works, so once it couldn't iterate over channels, it had no idea what the type of C should be, and so it couldn't infer a type for C, so I get an error about that. Argument not a subtype of parameter. Okay, so yeah, that's my next error. Argument not a subtype of parameter. So what's happening here is that I called the constructor with this channels variable. And if we come back here and look what we did, so split actually returns an array whose reference capability is ISO, or technically ISO hat. And so if we don't explicitly make channels a val, then let's see here. So if we don't explicitly do this, then instead the compiler will treat it as if we had done this, if we had made it an array of string ISO. And what that would mean is that we'd have an object that could only have one reference. So I guess there's a couple of things we could do. One is we can make it val, and since the return value of split is an ISO hat, that basically means we can assign it to any sort of type that we want, including val. So this should work. Another option would have been to just leave it like it was and have channels be an array string ISO, and then we could consume that channels variable, and that would allow us to pass it off to the constructor for Twitch chat channel notify. But let's just do this. Let's use vals, since we shouldn't ever need to modify this again, and this should be okay. And those were the two errors. So let's try building again. And I'm still not smart. Could not find value in array. I meant to type values. So sorry about that. Yeah, that's the thing that gets the iterator. All right, one more try. There we go. Okay, so now if I run without any arguments, I should get an error message that tells me that the first argument needs to be a comma-separated list of channels to join. And that's what happens. So now let's tell it to join my channel. And what did I do wrong? Oh, so I got the first argument should be a comma separated list of channels to join again. Because I had 2 here and I should have had 1. I don't know what I was thinking there. I know how command lines work. I just wasn't thinking right. Okay, so if I run this, it should join the aturls channel and it should print Wilbur in the channel again. And if you are watching this, you can see that it did in fact join and print Wilbur again. So cool. Let's see here. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do, probably, let's leave this up for a minute. Maybe we can go back, actually. Okay, so I'm scrolling back to where I'd been running this. So another thing we can do, part of the IRC protocol is this ping message. And what that does is it gives the server a way to check to see if the client is still connected. And so if the client gets a ping message from the server, it should respond with a pong message. And the pong message should be pong followed by this server string here. So if the server doesn't get a pong message back within a certain period of time, it will disconnect the client, or basically shut the connection down. It will assume that something happened to the client, or that the client just isn't well behaved, and it'll close that connection, because there's no reason to waste time with badly behaving clients. So we want to be a well-behaved member of the bot community. So let's respond to ping messages. So we've already done this thing where we split the message apart. So let's do an else if. And we want to see if the first part is ping. And if it is, we'll say got ping, and we will return a pong. And we want to return that second part of the ping that we got. So we'll do this, which will get us that next part of the message. So the parts are just splitting the incoming message up. And that should return that. So let's just say we'll just send that as a debug message, or print that as a debug message, and we'll send the pong out. And we actually want a space here. And I've been compiling without debug. So let's compile with debug, and then we'll see the debug messages, which will make it a little bit easier to see what's going on. Okay, so we rejoin the channel, and if we wait long enough, we're going to see a ping message from the server, and hopefully we'll reply with a Pong message of our own. All right, so this is probably on the, on the border of starting to get a little bit ugly, having all of our messages crammed into a, what could eventually become a very big else if statement. So we could probably start thinking about some ways to separate this out. And we've also got all of our messages coming in, potentially from all the different channels into the same place. Now, we're only connecting to one channel right now, so maybe we shouldn't worry too much about that. But anyway, let's maybe do a little bit of cleanup to try to make some of this a little nicer. So the first thing that I think I'd like to do is basically I have these things where I want to create a string that ends in a carriage return and new line. One of the problems that I've had in the past writing IRC servers or writing IRC clients is that I forget to put on the carriage return new line, and then I send things to the server and it doesn't recognize them as messages. So let's write a quick thing to do that. So Pony has this concept of primitives, and primitives are, I guess there's a few ways to think of them. One way to think of them is that they're kind of a collection of functions. In fact, I think Sylvan has, the creator of Pony, has said that a primitive is something like a module in ML. So if you've ever worked with ML, I guess maybe that makes some sense to you. But basically, this lets us bundle together some functions into kind of a namespace. The other nice thing that you can do is you can pass primitives around, so they basically become kind of singleton objects that you can pass around. But unlike an actual object or an actor, primitives can't have any state, so they can't have any properties. So again, just functions. So Pony doesn't let you create just kind of free-floating functions. A function always has to be part of some sort of object. And so if you don't have a class that you want to put a method in, then you can put it inside of a primitive. And there's kind of two different ways of doing that. So let's create a primitive called IRC message. So what you'll see sometimes in Pony programs is that there will be a primitive that has that basically acts like a function, and you do that by giving it a method called apply. So this will take that message that you pass in. It'll just append a carriage return and a new line to the end of it. So let's see here. So we can then come down here and we can replace these things with something like this. So that's probably not winning us too much, except that I think it makes it maybe a little clearer what we're doing. So let's just do that. Let's go back and check and see if we've gotten any of our, yeah, so we got a ping, we sent a pong. So that's exciting. Let's just see if we're still connected. Sent a message that says, hello, Mr. Ed, and we got it over here. So okay, so let's rebuild with this. Make sure I haven't made any mistakes. Cool. All right. So let's do something maybe a little more interesting here. Let's create a way to specify that we're going to look for particular messages and then we're going to do something with those messages. So we'll call this an IRC message responder. And this is going to be where we move some of the logic that responds to messages into this thing here. And then maybe we can come up with a way of specifying what we're looking for and how we want to respond a little more declaratively, hopefully. Let's see what we can do. Kind of making this up as I go along. So I think what we'd like to do is say, let's see here. if we get a priv message, which is how IRC tells you you've gotten that a message has been sent. IRC is a weird protocol. It was kind of grown organically. And so when someone sends a message to the channel, in fact, let's look at this. When I sent a message to the channel that said, "Hello, Mr. Ed," it came in looking like this. There's this string that tells you who sent the thing and what server it was on. Then there's this priv message, and then there's the channel, and then there's the message itself. And so even though the message isn't private to Mr. Ed, it comes as a priv message. Just anything we send looks like that. So what we want to do is look for server messages that have this format, where the second thing is priv message. And then we want to send those along to our class for further processing. So let's do that here. So if parts 1 notification too long, I can't type. So right now, let's just make this a primitive. We'll give it an apply method. And what should we pass to that? Maybe we'll just pass the channel and the message that came in. Maybe let's do this. This way, if we want to handle other types of messages, we can give them each a method and have that be a known thing. So in this case, we want the channel, which is part 2. Right, 0, 1, 2. And the message itself, which is everything after the colon. So what do we want to do there? We want to do part 3 substring 1. Okay, so gonna get a channel and the message in here, and so here's where it gets a little interesting, or one place for potentially interesting things. If we want to write something out, like we want to send a message back to the server, there's kind of a question of, do we do that within the method, or do we return something that says that we want to write something back to the server? There are kind of arguments that you could make either way. So let's do let's make some decision, and then we'll decide later if we want to change our minds on that. For right now, let's have this function return a string, and then we're going to say, let's say it can return either a string or none. If we don't want to respond, then we can just return none. And if we want to respond, then we can return a string. So we can use a match statement here, and this will let us say that if we get a string back, then we want to write that string and otherwise, if we get none, then we just don't write anything. So that's that. So over here, we'll say something like, if the message contains famous Mr. Ed, then we don't care what it says, we're just going to say hello. Hello there. Try to imagine Mr. Ed the horse saying, hello there. Yeah, so let's see what happens there. Let's give this a shot. Can rebuild. Didn't like this. Can't find declaration of part. I probably called the thing parts. So I probably used the wrong variable name there. Yes, parts. Let's try that again, now that we've changed the variable name. That looks better. Okay, we'll connect. We got our Wilbur message. So let's say I really like famous Mr. Ed. And nothing happened. So what did I do wrong? So I got a priv message. So that should have been picked up here. So let's do something fun since I've dragged you all here. Let's take a look at a little bit of real debugging. I mean, you know, the first thing we could do is we could throw some debug statements in, but we are programmers here. And so why use a debug statement when you can get out the big guns and start using lldb? So Pony uses LLVM, and it is more or less equipped to use lldb for debugging, which is really helpful if you know lldb. I'm a little rusty in my lldb, but y'all can, I guess, watch me as I try to debug this thing. Before we do any real lldb work, let's go ahead and load up the lldb Pony helper stuff. So I created a plugin for lldb called Pony lldb. I got it at GitHub. And it basically just gives you some extensions for working with certain kinds of Pony objects. It's not super functional. Mostly what it does is it gives you some slightly nicer wrappers for handling strings and arrays. At my job, we work a lot with strings and arrays, and so that is kind of a nice thing to have. So I have written instructions here that says that in order to use this, you load it like this. I'm going to take my own advice and try that. Let me see if I can remember where I actually put this. Pony lldb, great, cool. Let's cross our fingers and hope that my script is up to date enough to work. Cool. Okay. So, I want to find out why when I get here I'm not seeing any, I don't seem to be processing this message. So I'm just going to stick a breakpoint right here on line 72. And we'll see if we even get to that. Okay, so we've got our breakpoint, and now let's run our program. We've joined. Okay, so I sent the message and we received it, and we have gotten here. So that means that we recognized it as a private message. So let's see here. Can I... Let's take a look at some of these objects. So parts is an array of string val. So I can do this. It'll tell me a little bit more about my string val. Let's see here. Can I do this? Well, let's not worry too much about that for right now. Let's step into our priv message handler. So we're actually a little further into things than, yeah, than I necessarily wanted to be. So where are we here? Huh. So it looks like I didn't get a string, which surprises me a little bit. Let me put another breakpoint at line 81. Okay, there we are on line 81. So let's look at what it thinks some of these things are. So channel it sees as aturls. And message it sees as hi. So we'd expect it to not return anything. So I'm saying next, it's jumping around a little bit. Yeah, so sometimes you will end up in situations where it doesn't debug quite right. So in this case, yeah, it kind of took me to that line 81 a few times. Okay, so it's getting the right things in there. So let's try. Hello, famous Mr. Ed. Print out our message. Ah, okay. There's our problem. So it's seeing hello, it's not seeing the rest of the message. Now, I think I know how that happened. So I had broken up the message on all of the spaces. So basically, parts 3 is just the next thing up to the next space. And so really what I want is, I guess there's a couple of ways that I could do this. One is that maybe I just want to rejoin all of my parts back together. This isn't super efficient, but I know that I broke on spaces. And so basically I know that every break in that array, each element will be divided by a space. So if I want to put the array back together, I can just join the array starting at uh, 3. So this will give me a slice of the array starting at element 3. That'll then be joined using spaces. And then I can call substring still, which will get rid of the colon at the beginning. So let's try building that again. Okay, so receiver type is not a subtype of the target type. Receiver type is array string val ISO, and target type is array string val box. So this is the same thing that happened earlier. Basically, I called split and I got an ISO. Really what I probably want here is an array string val. I had an ISO and I couldn't call the slice method on it. So changing this to val means that that ISO hat will be basically assigned to a val. And then I'll have a val and I should be able to call slice on that. Let's see here, it's still not happy with me. Argument type. Argument is not a subtype of the parameter. Argument type is array string ref. Okay, so okay, that's right. Okay, so the problem here is that join actually takes an iterator. It doesn't take an array. So I need to call values on the thing that I get out of slice. So you'll see that in places where methods take an iterator. That way they don't have to commit themselves to, that way they don't have to commit themselves to a certain type. As long as you have something that's iterable, you can pass it in and it should be handled correctly. And that builds. Let's try it again. We connected. And we're going to say, I like famous Mr. Ed. And famous Mr. Ed, hello, unknown command. Oh, you know what I'll bet I did? Okay, so yeah, I'm just returning hello there. What I really want to do is say curve message plus Chan plus. Okay, this is how you actually send a private message back. So you can cast an ISO hat by just specifying a ref cap on the left side. I suspect it does recover end implicitly. Oh, no. No need to apologize for disturbing. So the thing with ISO hat is that basically what that means is it's an ephemeral type, and it says right now this thing has no references to it. And so because there are no references to it, you can basically assign it to a variable with any kind of reference capability. And so it's not so much that it's a recover. It's just that you already have something that doesn't have any references, and so you can kind of do whatever you want with it. You have maximum flexibility there. And in this case, it's really just because the return type of that particular method is an array string ISO hat. So that's a good question. All right, let's try this again. Still not liking my message that I'm trying to send out. What do I need to do? Yeah, if we put a recover in there, it should compile. Yeah. Unknown command. Let me see if I can figure out what I did wrong here. Let me just print out, debug out this message and make sure it looks like what I think I should be sending. And that worked. Did I not compile last time? It didn't compile. Okay, well, there we go. I used famous Mr. Ed in a command. Famous Mr. Ed replied to me and said, hello there. Or he just kind of acknowledged that he had been mentioned. So yeah, basically now famous Mr. Ed is kind of a creeper. If you say his name, even if you're not talking to him, he will say hello there to let you know that he's watching. Observing, keeping score. Kind of like certain creepy weirdos do on Twitter sometimes. So anyway, yeah, there you have it. We've extended the IRC bot a little bit. You've seen hopefully a few more parts of Pony. We got to look at the debugger a little bit. You saw that there is a set of debugger lldb tools, Pony lldb, that make it a little bit easier to work with things like strings and arrays. Yeah, so I think I will probably end the stream at this point. I guess I'll leave it open if anybody wants to say anything to famous Mr. Ed and see him reply with hello there. I'll sit here for another minute. Does anybody have any, I guess if you have any questions or anything, please type them in while I'm sitting here. So yeah, I guess I'm planning on doing these screencasts on a semi-regular basis. I am Cassio Juarez on Twitter. If you want to send me any thoughts, or I think you can send me messages on Twitch. I don't know. I'm new to Twitch. But if you have things that you want to see, I've had a request for doing a stream about FFI in Pony. I've got this plotter art project thing that I've been playing around with in Pony, if anybody wants to see any of that. We can keep working on the IRC bot. I've done some open sound control stuff, so if anybody wants to see some music related stuff in Pony, we can do some of that. So there's lots of options for the future. So if you want to get in touch with me through one of these channels, please feel free to do it. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast, or podcast, whatever this is, Twitch stream. Sure. And have a good weekend.